In the dark of night, when the gates are closed, fabric walls billow in the gentle breeze of a late summer's evening. To climb up the lengths of empty space, clear the distance between gravel on the ground and the magenta sky at dusk. Black and white stripes in eerie simplicity that think nothing of remaining in the state they were originally designed. They are remarkably innocent. Protectors of the magic within, or perhaps, guardians of the anomalous. The clowns are not meant to inspire laughter, but rather, fright. Their faces, unlike the tense and measured lines, are misshapen and colored in blood-red paints. They outline smiles built of sharpened teeth, and when the wind gusts violently, their fabric costumes, torn from years of battery, snap disturbingly. The sound is a song that makes me shiver. The Cotton Candy Carnival came to town once a year. Was set up in an open space where the trees had refused to grow their leaves, let their bark peel off in sheets because they were not afraid to be known as what they truly were. Pretenders, just like the creatures inside. The carnival was a tune composed of a single child's laughter that you could never quite find the source of. It was a swing that moved without a current of air, squeaking as it swayed, and it was always footsteps behind you when there was actually no one there. The lock was never clicked shut, and the gate, although heavy on rusted hinges, was worth the struggle necessary to open it. I let the dirt kick up around my feet in clouds of dust when I refused to lift my boots far enough from the world beneath me to stop the scuffing. Passing under the welded metal sign that arched overhead, showcased the proper name for the oddities inside, I felt the unease of every hidden set of eyes on me, and some I could tell were not friendly. This was a different world at night, and while the fine hairs of my arms stood and my skin crawled with the threat that precariously dangled in the ignored hours of the nighttime, I felt like a piece of this place could have been home. I ducked my head down when I moved, darted quickly between stopped rides, sealed food trucks, and unlit booths meant for games that were tricks to be played. I wore a coat in the summer because inside the air was a little less forgiving. The temperature lowered with the acceleration of my thudding heart. The anxiety in my chest screamed for release, willed me to turn back, but I pressed on, balled my fingers into fists and buried them in deep jacket pockets to conceal their shaking. Past the roller coaster with no loops, the dragon who breathed ice in place of fire, the fish with legs on land, and the ghostly lady who died each morning, only to be reborn with the arrival of nightfall. There was a merry-go-round at the carnival's farthest point. Beside a pink painted stand, swirls in every shade. Ashes of roses, aurora blush, and cotton candy fluff was a ride with irascible mares in one section of secluded booths. Chipped paint inspired their inelegance. I didn't mind because the seats were silent and thoughts here were never interrupted. A single weekend of the year. That was all the carnival had to give me, and I greedily latched onto it every time it came around. So I might have some solitude, a little peace in an otherwise loud lifetime. A symbolic sparing of my mind. I curled up on the bench, lay back against the floored armrest and brought my knees up to my chest, a shell of safety in a space of suffering. I focused on what was right in front of me instead of letting the melancholia of the future's uncertainty creep into my ribcage, finding a place to settle. The breeze moved the weeds, the only kind of life that was willing to grow in such a desolate place. They were outcasts, unwanted but survivors, and so they knew how to fit in much better than I did. I cared not for the gentle luxury of breathing. Wished my chest would stop rising so I could join the ghost that howled at the sunrise, because at least she had purpose, and that was better than what I did. Myself, I had nothing. Not even you anymore. I dreamed the clowns, with their claws of silver sparkling against the dim glow of the moonlight, had torn into my chest with twisted amusement, didn't find what they were hunting for and abandoned me, vulnerable, left me to bleed out on my own. While they hurt me, the pain they caused was far less than yours. Yours was intended to make me relive all of my hauntings. I closed my eyes to see you again, to picture you in those beautiful seconds, those harrowing seconds, the last few seconds while you were still mine. I try to stop the memory at that fateful part, but every time I do, it slips out of my grasp and I'm left trembling, gasping for air and clawing at my throat, willing it to come but it doesn't, and I can't breathe while you're walking away. You never turn around. Because now you don't care if I live or die, so it shouldn't matter to you if my lungs are afire and my heart is shattered. And then the The shards were shrapnel to my skin, and every breath that does come after you is simply agony. I gasp loudly and cover my mouth, aware of my mistake as soon as it's made. The lights around me hum with electricity, alive and bright. I shiver when the realization that I am not alone finally registers, and I hope no one hears me because I am so afraid of what might be in the shadows. I curse the small part of me that hopes you've returned, and the whole of my heart that craves your protection. At the sensation of the faintest touch on the back of my neck, I bolt upright and turn around to seek the source. I see nothing but the cotton candy cart and the lifeless attractions composing the carnival, yet for some reason, I still feel the tickle on my skin, and I swat at its maker with the intention to kill. The contrition I feel when I see the slaughtered spider in my upturned palm is almost too much to bear, and I feel the familiar tears resurfacing and the sickness in my stomach returning to do away with me one last time. No longer concerned if the world is watching, I collapse. I sink to my knees and let my torso slump because there is nothing in this world that can fix me, and I'm not sure how much longer I can move through this existence alone. The sobs are heavy and they rack my body until I'm broken, but no more relieved than I was before I cursed the moon. So I look up like the ghost that wanders, and I howl too. I cry and I plead and I beg the earth to listen. I pray for my freedom, and I hope with all that I have that someone might know how to save me, because I sure as hell can't save myself. When I tilt my chin towards the heavens, I see the mess of the universe and what remains of the life of the dead. Overhead, a perfectly constructed spider web, woven with all of the care in the world, sparkles with dew in the moonlight. That is the way of this planet. No matter how hard we work, or how desperately we fight, no matter how high the stakes and how wonderful the victory may be, the world is never fair. I make that your excuse for leaving. I catch a silhouette moving, gliding slowly, and as it passes me, an ominous voice whispers from a distance where the lights of the merry-go-round don't reach. Tell your lover to turn out the lights. Her warning does not frighten me though, because, at the mention of you, my heart races and I think of your warmth, and your kisses, and of you waiting to come home. Maybe you could love me again. You looked like the hero I remembered you to be when you emerged from the shadows. A little darker, faded in a way, but still you. Your cerulean eyes a little foggy, but also faintly bright like they were the last time I saw them, distorted with the sea of tears that swam that day. Hello, darling. Your voice was almost inaudible. I could hardly believe you were standing before me. I didn't get to revel in the happy reunion I'd hoped for. You warned me I should leave, and I felt my insides turn to dust, crumble from the betrayal, and blow away gently with the approach of morning, until I felt hollow, and the notion was fitting. While you turned away, I saw the demon in you, the monster you'd become, and I was frozen in place, rattled at the sight of your spine and the way it seemed to break through your skin, tiny spikes that dotted your flesh. The skin there was rotting and your bones were more prominent, as if you'd starved until your breaking point and only gave in so you could live. I watched a single shiver run through you, and then your hands twitched at your sides, your fingers morphing, extending in length until you were like the clowns and your nails were pointed claws that I worried might be used against me. Just go, you pleaded. Even though I was timid, unsure of what you'd become, I still felt more alive in that moment, just in your presence, that I planted my feet and stayed in place because I was willing to die at your hand in place of living a lifetime without you. I promised I'd never leave. You whipped back around, stirred up the dust and shot stones flying. I took a deep breath and imagined I was dying, shut my eyes and smiled at the peace it would bring me. I felt you approach slowly, stalking your prey. I tried to force the burned image of your dilated pupils, your yellowed skin, your inhuman walk, out of my mind. I pretended you were still you, and that we might have a happily ever after, until I felt your steaming breath on my neck, and I couldn't contain my scream. The Cotton Candy Carnival comes to town once a year. We set up our tents, fabric striped in black and white, with poles that stretch from the ground to the sky and brush against the stars in the nighttime. The gate is always open, and the key in its lock, because everyone is always welcome, if they'd like to stay. Just because the sun has disappeared from its place in the sky, doesn't mean our jesting must end. The outside world is inexorable, but we offer our friends refuge. Inside the tents, the air is a little colder, but here there is life. The trees that surround us refuse to grow, and the flowers never bloom, but in the Cotton Candy Carnival, you can be anything. All you have to do is pretend.